Madam Mayor, it's 6 o'clock.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Tuesday, August 27th, Electric Utility City Commission meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Pam Triolo,
Here.
Vice Mayor Andy Amoroso,
Here.
Commissioner Scott Maxwell,
Here.
Commissioner Omari Hardy,
Here.
Commissioner Herman Robinson.
Here.
Thank you.
If everyone would please rise for the pledge led by Commissioner Maxwell.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
justice being.
Any additions, deletions, or reordering?
No, Madam Mayor.
Seeing there are none, we will move on to approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Public participation of non-agenda and consent agenda items. We have one card that's on its way.
And we do have a presentation as well, some things we want to cover as presentation.
As presentation? Okay, I'm
Yep.
sorry, it's not listed, and we have to introduce it as a change to the agenda
Wait.
to add.
Isn't it on one of the items that's already on the agenda?
No, not the reliability numbers, we're not.
Okay, sorry.
That was it.
And we'll have to go back and add it to the agenda.
We will, I'm sorry.
Okay, so then I'll need a motion to,
Right.
What number is that? In consent. In consent,
Five.
Five.
and we'll need to add that item to the agenda.
So moved.
Moved and second, anyone?
Second.
Second, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Did I have votes on both? Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Sorry. Yes?
That's fine.
I'm agreed.
Okay. All right, now this
I'm agreeable.
is,
So he's adding a presentation, so it'll be 4A, Madam Mayor.
gotcha. And then let me just check here. That's one, and that's item. Okay, so this is non-agenda, and this is for
Well, no, it is going to take 7:30.
item C. Okay.
Getting started.
All right, go ahead. Sorry, I just had to do it right. Richard, we have to go back to the presentation. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the presentation is really in two parts. We're going to talk about what we're doing to get ready for this potential storm that could be coming our way, and we're just going to give you a snapshot of how reliability has been looking on a year-to-date basis.
Thank you.
No decisions to be made on that, just more informational. So first of all, with regards to the storm, most of us have probably been tracking Dorian as it works its way up through the lower part of the Caribbean, and it appears it's going to come up the island chain. The latest report, which I saw a few minutes ago, had it making landfall a little bit further north of us than what it looked like early this morning. But I can tell you that since yesterday, we've been meeting at the electric utility and planning for what we would do over the weekend. It looks like it would approach us sometime on Saturday. We would begin to see the effects of a storm based on its current track. What we've done so far is we've notified the department heads to let their folks know that the majority of the what we would call line workers and power plant staff and our meter shop folks would be working on Saturday as if it was pretty much of a normal work day, just in case we have issues that we have to deal with in terms of outages, or in the event that it really does go into a full-blown storm, we would go into our emergency mode. We will also notify our call center operation to be ready for an increased number of calls on Saturday. We will not have customer service open. That would not normally be open on a Saturday anyway, but members of our leadership team at customer service would be on the property, and we're talking through the communications aspects, things like that. So we're beginning to gear up. We're not moving a lot of material around. We're not making plans that we can't reverse, but we're watching it closely, and we'll refine those plans as we continue to watch the weather updates 3 or 4 or 5 times a day and see how it goes.
Are we putting up our hurricane stuff for the city too? Or you're going to continue to watch it? And
We'll continue to watch it. I would defer to the assistant city manager on that question with regards to the rest of the city. But as far as the power plant and system ops goes, we'll continue to watch it. We're not at that point yet.
We're going to wait.
we're going to wait. Okay.
But we're getting ready to be ready.
Okay. Sounds good.
We've also canvassed our contractors that are working for us on site right now, doing some of the strip work to make sure that they're available to us as well if we need them. Those are additional line crews that we could use. So they've indicated they would be available to us as well if we need them through the weekend. So we're doing the right things to be ready.
And have we called in for backups? Should we, the way in which we do ahead of time when we find out any more information?
Yes, if it
needed?
looks like it's going to escalate, we would reach out through FMEA and request mutual aid, mutual assistance crews from other municipalities.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Commissioner
I
Robinson.
just, and I know you'll be prepared, but I'm going to ask the citizens to look out there, they're on the street for storm drains. And if they can take a broom or a shovel or whatever it takes to clear the storm drains, that would be much appreciated and probably to their advantage.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. Thank you. Then we'll go on to our public
We're
participation.
gonna go through the
Oh.
reliability indices really quick.
Okay.
So we track our reliability. We started doing it last year when we went back and looked at a few years worth of data, scrubbed the data, and then began to publish it. As you can see, there were jumps up or increases in reliability incidents and therefore poor reliability in 2018. And that doesn't mean that we weren't making progress. However, in 2018, we changed the process of measurement from the prior years. In the prior years, the outages were determined to have begun when the customer called us, when we know the outage probably began sometime before that. And the outage would be considered to end when the crew reported in that the job was done. What we started doing in 2018 was a much tougher criteria, which was using the AMI system, using the actual timestamp, if you will, that the meter reported that it lost power. So we have a much tougher timestamp on the start of the outages. Therefore, the outages got longer than they had in the past because of the way we were measuring. So the real measurement for us is how we're doing in 19 versus 18. This is a review of just the first 6 months of the calendar year, looking at where we were in 18 and where we were in 17. So as you can see, what we refer to as SAFE, SADI, KD, MAFE, they're all described in the subsequent pages as to what those are, but they're measures of reliability that are standard in the industry. What we did further was to say, well, we've had improvements. How much have we improved as a percentage over the prior year? So if we're looking at SAFE, which is a system average interruption frequency, we've decreased the number of interruption frequency by 35%. So that's a nice improvement. On the duration of those interruptions, we've decreased them by 56%. From a customer's perspective, this is the individual customers, what they feel, as opposed to what we look at in a system average. The customers who have been interrupted, that's gone down by 32%. Our momentary interruptions have only gone down by 2%. That's actually good that it hasn't gone down by a lot, because momentary interruptions that are a flicker, they're less than a minute in length. What we've tried to do is to decrease the long outages that we have at the expense of even having some momentary. So momentaries are better than being out for minutes or hours. Therefore, we're not as concerned about momentaries as we are for the more sustained interruptions. And L bar is a time to repair, and that's improved also. So the outages that we have tend to be large, and they tend to be ones that we can restore rather quickly. So we continue to work our way through the system and make improvements. Some of this is as a result of the SHRIP work that we've begun with the capital that we had in the loan fund. And some of it is work that we've done by better deployment of our O&M activities in terms of how we balance phases, address situations where we have more homes on transformers than we should. We've also done a lot of good work on vegetation management or tree trimming. We have a part-time retired lineman who came back, Ed Wamsley, who does an excellent job of managing our tree crews, and we've attacked it. We've put more money towards that effort, and it's yielding benefits. So we're getting good results from the work that we're doing. Our reliability is improving. Let's go to where are we statewide? It's one of the things that we do, besides measuring how we're doing relative to how we did the prior years, how are we doing relative to our peers around the state. So in terms of SADI, which is the average duration of interruptions for the average customer, we've moved from the 4th quartile. I like to do things in quartiles to show how we're doing. We moved from the 4th quartile into the 3rd quartile. So we're doing better. These numbers, by the way, are reported by each utility around the state into the Florida Municipal Electric Association or into FMPA, the Municipal Power Agency, and then they publish those results. So basically, everybody brings their numbers forward.
Except Jacksonville.
Well, not every utility reports, and for many years we did not. But we started, and now we do. So not everybody does, but we're doing better. Our goal, and if you look at these things, you may see where it says the yearly goal. The yearly goal we've established as the number that was achieved by the last entity in the first quartile. So our goal is to get into that first quartile. That's where we want to be. So we post that number so we can get a sense of, well, how much more work do we have to do to get to that top quartile where we want to be? So that's a number that we use to give ourselves a carrot to chase. If we look at the average duration index, we're in the first quartile. According to the data that's out there, we're the best in this category. Now, I'm not going to take a lap on that. It's great that we're there, but we have a lot of work to do in the other indices, and be more interested in seeing where we are there in a sustained period of time other than just the first 6 months of the year. So we were in the first quartile last year. We're there today. Let's do everything we can to stay there. One that we're not doing so good on is safety. We're near the top in terms of near the worst. That's something that needs to be improved. That's the average frequency of interruptions for the average customer. We have too many interruptions for our customers, obviously, and that's why we're trying to get after it. So even though we're doing great in some of these criteria, and they're all slightly different in how they're calculated, and they're all important in our industry, they all tell us slightly different things, but this one we're not doing great on. Next is MAFI, which is the momentary. So you can see we're getting better. We're still in the third quartile, but we are getting better. And obviously you can look to see who some of the other utilities are that we're ranking ourselves against. By the way, on some of these, you'll see the FPL number. That is a number that they only publish once per year. So when we do show an FPL number for some of these measures, it's the 2018 number because they don't show current year numbers. So after the full year of 19, they will provide their data to the Florida Public Service Commission. We'll be able to extract it from those reports, and then we'll compare ourselves to how we did there. And then L-bar is the average length of a single outage. We were in the fourth quartile. We're still in the fourth quartile. We're still there. We're doing a little bit better, but we're still in the fourth quartile. So if there's a takeaway from this data, other than just being a bunch of numbers on the screen, it's that we're improving, but we're not where we need to be, but we are on the right path with the things that we're doing. And that completes my presentation.
More? Okay. Richard Stowe, followed by Peggy Fisher. And remember, this is non-agenda items relating to electric.
You need the microphone.
Do you have the microphone? Ed, can
Richard Stowe, 414 North Federal Highway. I just first want to express some concern. It's my understanding that the last time I came to a city commission meeting regarding electric utilities, there was an agreement for the Electric Utility Advisory Board to meet every other month, and it's my understanding they've only met once since then. And the advantage of the EUAB is that you have people who serve on that board as volunteers who laser focus on particular topic, in this case electric utilities, who can then like aggregate more information and like give better advisement to the commission. The commissioners yourself, you, the mayor and commissioners, you're generalists. You're looking at the big picture, the big strategy for the town. You cover like a lot of issues. So this is great that you're sitting in on this, but you really need further advisement from the Electric Utility Board. Second thing that I've heard a little bit about the planning and direction that Mr. Liberty is leading the utility board, utility in, and it's my initial reaction that some of his focus is imprudent and risky and will have a long-term detrimental effect on the wealth and prosperity of the city. So, and then thirdly, I do want to talk about just briefly that there's a concept that Amory Lovins introduced back in, I don't know, 80s or 90s called negawatts. And negawatts are very interesting because they can be used to the benefit not only of like a utility, like our municipal utility, but also to the advantage of the citizens, the residents. So if you will, negawatts can have a democratizing effect on energy use in the city and how the utility functions.
Thank you. Peggy Fisher?
Peggy Fisher, 508 North A Street. I just wanted to share some news that's just come out today, probably in the last 7 hours, about PBSO Deputy Dave German, who lost his battle with cancer. Today, he was assigned to District 14, Lake Worth Beach, and I would like to see that the city acknowledges his service to our city and all its residents and offers our condolences to his family and to the other members of District 14.
I don't know what is Deputy Sherman. I don't know. We should ask her.
Get some information, let us know.
I will definitely find out and let you know.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. No consent agenda. So item 8A, Comcast pole attachment and settlement agreement.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Mr. Liberty?
Our speaker on this matter will be Brian King, our Assistant Director of Power Generation, who was assigned this as a special project with the assistance of Melissa Anderson of our law firm, City, who has been working very hard, not just on Comcast, but also on the AT&T agreement, which we are nearing an agreement on with them, and we'll come back to you in a meeting or two with that. They were also very involved with the earlier project that we got approval on with the wireless attachment, which was around Castle.
So can I trouble you to grab that microphone because you're probably being.
So this is the team
Needed
that
it.
has been leading our efforts on these fronts. So Crown Castle, we've already reported on the first successful, and now they're going to report on where we are with Comcast. I'll let you guys work together on this presentation. If you want to go through your.
Yeah, just if you can, Brian, just talk into that.
Sure.
Close and comfortable.
Good. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Brian King, Assistant Director for Power Generation for the City of Lake Worth Beach. Today we'll go over our Comcast agreement. Melissa and I, along with Paul Nicholas, have been working diligently on this. This is one of those projects, like Ed said, that he had us go find some of these older contracts that haven't been looked at in some time, and to find out what the value was to the City of Lake Worth Beach, and if there was any way to improve that value.
Speak into the microphone.
If there was any way to improve that value of those contracts. So this contract, this Comcast contract, from what we were able to find, the last time it was looked at was in 1998. I won't tell you what I was doing in 1998, but yeah, we
Still in the womb.
we took a look at what we were getting paid from Comcast per pole attachment, and you can see there was about $3.90, which I think was the going rate in 1998. And that either expired or by contract just defaulted to year after year. In June of 2018, we did commission an audit of all of our city poles and wired attachments using WGI. And you can see what that audit included: verification of the poles, identifying attachments and who was attached, etc. What we found when we did the audit, what WGI found was that in the 1998 agreement, Comcast was allowed 4,276 attachments to Lake Worth poles. And what we found in 2018 is they actually had over 7,300 attachments. So there was a significant delta there. So that's when Melissa gets involved, legal gets involved, and they put Comcast on notice that they had unauthorized attachments, and that we had to address that. So settlement, which just means getting the lawyers involved, is good lawyers. We shared our audit with Comcast and allowed them to take a look at it and come back with any challenges to our audit, which they did not do, at least not yet. So one of the items of the settlement was a back rent, and I can let Melissa speak on that, on how many years we're allowed to go back or how far we're able to go back in time to collect some of those unauthorized attachments. I think it was 5 years was the limit.
So is this on? Can you hear me? Okay. They obviously the unauthorized attachments, we really didn't know how long they had not been paying us rent, because the last time anybody had done a count was in 1998. But there was a big discrepancy, obviously, between the 1998 numbers and the 2018 numbers. Due to law, we can only go back really 5 years because that's the statutory time limit that we can go back on a contract claim. And they agreed to pay us their maximum amount that they would have owed going 5 years back. We then asked for a portion of the cost of the audit because it cost the city of Lake Worth a lot of money to go out and count these polls. And they, I think, gave us $50,000 for that. So between the two, the settlement is for about $110,000, and then and then also you're probably going to talk about the increase in rates, but the increase in rates started for the actual pole attachment started in April of this year, so they're already paying those increased rates. So I think that's about an extra $200,000 and all in for the settlement plus this year and the increase in rates. And then those rates for Comcast are going to go up next year to $16.50, and then at 5 years it will go up 3%, and then after that it's open for negotiation.
So what's the total of the 7,300 times the increased rate? What does that mean to us, bottom line number wise?
For a year, I did a 5-year analysis on it. So the 5-year analysis, the last 5 years, what we got paid from Comcast through the pole attachment agreements was just over $83,000. The next 5 years will be just over $560,000. So that's the difference.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
That's huge. I want to thank you both and any of the other staff that helped out. This was one of my initiatives that was spearheaded from, visiting the Gulf Stream and having some things up on the top roof of the Gulf Stream that may or may not have been, getting paid right. They didn't have permits. And I said, when was the last time we looked at any of this other stuff? And I know that we're looking into FPU and everybody else. I want to thank you for all your hard work and all the monies found on behalf of the taxpayers. Thank you.
Could you say again what the going rate was in 1998?
I'm assuming it was that $390. That's what we were paying in 1998.
Okay.
It's in that ballpark. I mean,
and what's the going rate today? Is that 1201?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Yeah.
So you will see that this goes over the new rates that Melissa did talk about. The first year with Comcast going up to $12.50, and the subsequent years to $16.50, and then the escalators of 3%. So here's a quick analysis of our new rates. You'll see that revenues increased over 685% over the last 5 years versus the next 5 years. The Lake Worth Beach attachment rate is now above the FMEA average. We'll be getting that $16.50 in that second year, and the FMEA average is $13.48. And we did an audit of the FMEA utilities and what attachments they have and who they have attached. And from what we got back with our new contract, Lake Worth Beach will receive the highest rate for wired attachments from anybody in FMEA, or those that report who is attached to their poles.
That's crucial. So does FMEA not include FPL?
That's correct.
Okay. So do we have any way of knowing what FPL charges for pole attachments?
So FP&L is what's called an investor-owned utility.
Right.
And investor-owned utilities are required under federal law to charge a federal a rate according to a federal calculation.
Okay.
Municipal-owned electric facilities are exempt from those regulations.
Okay.
And so Lake Worth, other FME entities such as Homestead, Gainesville, Jacksonville, are able to charge a different rate from FP&L. Additionally, it's really impossible for us to know what the FP&L rate is because it's private information and that it's not public.
So, okay. I'm guessing that would mean that whatever the FMEA rate is, to the extent that there are experienced negotiators like yourselves, other places and other municipal utilities, it would more closely reflect what the market would.
Yeah, I mean, Ed, when we started discussing this, Ed was they were very they went about it the right way in that they did this FMEA survey. The prices, there was a good range of prices, but what we found was the more recently negotiated the contracts were, obviously the higher the rates were. Wireline and wireless, which is Crown Castle is your wireless, which are far higher rates. So we tried to find we tried to go to the higher end of the market range.
Okay. So basically, whatever was most recently negotiated, you kind of wanted to
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott that.
Yeah, because the market has changed really
Okay.
rapidly in the last 5 years. So
Okay. And I guess my next question is, for the escalators, did you try to match the annual percentage increase of the rate that we would charge them with the compound average annual growth of the rates previously? Because the CAGR of the pole attachment rate is larger than the escalator going forward. And I'm wondering if you feel like because we're already at the top of the market that, it's okay, we don't have to go for exactly the rate of growth for these.
I'll let staff address that because they were more concerned about the numbers.
Okay.
We wanted to pick a number that was, or negotiate to a number that was fair to both sides. So it wasn't it can't be a one-sided negotiation. It has to be both parties coming away feeling that they've got something, and both parties gave something. So the escalator that we settled on was one that was acceptable to the client, to Comcast, who's a client on our polls, and to us, knowing that, keep in mind, Comcast's clients are also our residents. So as we pass on these rates to Comcast, they'll have to either absorb it or pass those on to the residents as well. So we felt that we reached a good, fair balance on what that rate escalator should be going forward.
Okay. All right.
Vice Mayor?
As we move forward, you have 7,000 some odd pole attachments. Is there a maintenance plan now to monitor? Because as 5G comes online, I would assume that they'd want, more attachments, more, there may be more money involved.
Yeah,
Are we monitoring that?
Correct. There's a process for them to go through now, which we've dictated through that attachment agreement for additional attachments. There's approval processes for additional attachments. We were also mandated that in that pole attachment agreement that we would have contractors who Comcast uses in cases where attachments had to be moved, that we would be able to contact them if we were not getting a response from Comcast. So yes, all of those have been addressed.
Now let's talk about those third-party contractors. Does Comcast have the third-party contractors that represent other, like Verizon and other ones that will try to use the Comcast pole to put everybody else on, or is that completely separate now?
I wouldn't know. I believe Melissa might be in it, but Comcast doesn't have any poles. They're in the wired attachments business. They want to attach to everybody else's poles. They don't have any poles.
Well, I think you're talking about overlashing,
Right.
which is a Comcast, once they get a wire on the pole, it's really their facility, and then sometimes they'll let somebody come overlash. So we specifically, apparently they've inherited some assets that that had overlashing, They were very concerned about those. So we've actually grandfathered the old overlashed facilities in. They've got to give us a complete report as to what facilities are overlashed within 90 days.
Okay.
So we know what is on there. We will grandfather those in, and then they are not allowed to put any further overlashing on to their existing facilities.
Okay.
Unless we get money
Yeah.
from it and there's a separate agreement.
Yeah, I just want to make sure as the 5G starts clicking in and everybody wants pole attachments, and that we, get the biggest bang for our buck.
So what it appears happened over time was that as Comcast grew and came into the market and acquired companies that were already on the poles, or they acquired new companies, they were allowing them to overlash or also hang on to their attachment without notifying us. So we've now reached agreement how that will be handled going forward. And we need to do that for a couple of reasons. One is the space is valuable. We want to be paid for it. But the second is, from a physical point of view, this is all loading on the pole. So we need to review the load calculations on the pole, which accounts for the conductors that we have, the transformers, the capacitor banks, the insulators, the cross arms, the wind loads, and the mass of all of the stuff that's hanging on the pole to make sure that we've got the right size pole there, that it can handle the attachment. Also clarify one issue with respect to when we say contractors. One of the things that was very important to us was to be able to get them to move when we need them to move. If we have to move a pole because of road construction or because of a sidewalk relocation or road widening, or the pole is broken, we need them to be able to actually respond. And it was very important to us to have a position in this agreement where if they didn't respond within X amount of time, that we had the right to use contractors approved by them to have those contractors move their facilities and then charge them for it. We didn't want to be in a situation we'd have our hands tied indefinitely with a pole left in the middle of a street that we're trying to widen and we can't get them.
I
to
know
come and move.
AT&T, we had issues with AT&T a little bit on that.
Yeah,
was just gonna
I
ask
don't want to
that
have to walk
question.
myself to HR when I get on that conversation. But
they
yeah,
on
that's
the
a
same
difficult
pole?
one.
Are they on the same poles?
In some cases, yes.
That's,
Yeah, we have multiple people attaching to the poles.
And is the goal to work with all of these individual companies to do the same?
That's in progress now.
That's in
We're-
progress. So the Crown Castle is the one that we've already achieved. That was wireless attachments. They'll do about 35 or so attachments in their plan, 30 to 35. Comcast and then AT&T. Comcast and AT&T are wired attachers, and we have other entities that are interested in coming in as wireless attachers as well.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 8B, resolution.
Hold on, you have a
I'm sorry.
motion.
Take a vote.
I've got a motion. Do we have any public comment cards on that? Seeing there are none, all those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 8B, resolution number 46-2019, extending deadline for compliance with the interconnection rules and regulations.
So moved.
Liberty?
Yes, I'll provide a little bit of background on this. When this body approved the moratorium for solar, it would have required everybody, or did require everybody, to sign the new interconnection agreement before the expiration of the moratorium. To date, not everybody has done so, but many, many people have done it, and many more are proceeding in good faith. So our suggestion is to not slam the door on them on August 31 when the moratorium expires, but give them additional time to continue in good faith to get their documents in and sign their agreements. So we're proposing an extension to the time for existing customers to complete their documentation. They remain in the program. They're not going away. They're here. So we're just giving them more time. The moratorium will expire, or we're suggesting it should expire, but allow those customers more time. Don't slam the door on them.
Got a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor, I'm sorry.
Well, this,
Mr. Robinson?
that means that anybody wanting to come in won't be coming in, is it?
That's a different matter. This just extends the deadline for the existing customers that had to sign their agreements by the end of the moratorium. It gives them more time, even though the moratorium will expire. They'll have more time to sign their agreements.
Okay.
So the moratorium expires the 31st.
Right. And we've had customers, for example, who might be snowbirds. I know Joel Rutsky is here. Our revenue protection manager has been heavily involved with this. Meets with every single one of them as he reaches out to them. They want to come in maybe make copies, have a conversation, so he meets with every one of them, and we just want to give them more time.
So it ends and they still have more time to do that. We've got a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, moving on to item C, resolution number 45-2019, amending the rates, credits, and billing for net metering accounts.
So
Motion
moved.
to move.
Got a motion from the Vice Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by the Vice Mayor.
Okay, I'll provide some background to what staff has produced. We've had a number of conversations with members of the UAB. We had a start and a stop in a meeting with the UAB where not all of the members were able to speak because two of them had a conflict as determined by the Palm Beach County Commission Ethics. But for the ones who were able to speak, we did solicit their input. We had other members of the community that came and used their time at the meetings to speak. We had members of the industry who came as well, and other people that have come and gone from our offices, including the customers who have come in and have spoken to us while reviewing the documents. So, and conversations that we've had with this body, both individually and here in the public forum. So we've put together what we believe is the best way to proceed from staff's point of view. You're obviously free to, change it as you wish, but I'll read through the basics of what we've put forward.
Could I just say that the Ethics Commission was involved because of a conflict of interest, not because of an ethical breach?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want the public to understand that we are an ethical city.
No, that's a very good point, and I'll add to that. The two individuals had a conflict of interest because they both happened to have systems, and one of them was an installer. It wasn't because of anything that they had done that was improper, and it actually helped to give them guidance so they wouldn't get themselves into a situation which they probably didn't see coming and certainly didn't want to get into. So it was a good thing that we did that. Yes. In your packet, actually, Joel handies out, was a slide with some numbers on it where it had customer counts. We discovered an error in those customer counts, so we're reissuing those documents, and we'll talk through those in a minute. We also identified a typo in the staff report, which identified the commercial rate as decimal 0.1 and change. That should be, the 0 was incorrect. It's a typo. It should be 0 point and then 1 and then the rest of the number. We typed it in wrong in describing the commercial rate that customers are currently paying for our commercial customers. Okay, so where staff is at, what the documents we've drafted have some underlying tenets and concepts to them. One is allow the moratorium to expire at the end of this month. It's run its course. We've produced the interconnection agreement. Again, not all of the customers have signed it, but about, I'll check with Joel, 21?
We're up to, actually, they're starting to come in quicker now. I think they're worried about the deadline. So I think as of this morning, this afternoon, I'm sorry, we're actually up to about 30 that are done and complete. And I probably have another 20 or so that have sent in paperwork, but not the complete package.
It is our intention to honor those.
Yes, yes. The second underlying tenet for us is that for existing customers with systems that are already installed, right, to allow them an additional time till the end of the year to come into compliance with the interconnection agreements. Third tenet, grandfather all existing systems. In other words, not require anybody to remove anything that they've already installed. They were installed without staff knowing that a 10 kW cap was in place from 2012. Staff didn't know it, customers didn't know it. It would not be fair, in my opinion, to go back and say, remove some equipment that you've had for X number of years that were already approved. So we're of the opinion that allow those systems to continue to operate. Minimum customer charge, we feel that should apply to all customers, including the net metered customers. Under current rules from 2012, net metered customers do not pay the minimum customer charge. That basically says If you don't use, you can't have a bill of 0 or 10 or 15 or $20. Everybody has to have it no less than the minimum customer charge. And that would apply to all customers. Right now, the net metered customers are exempt from that charge. Staff suggestion is that they should also be required to pay that charge.
And that charge is approximately.
$31.40 a month.
Which includes the customer service charge, 1054.
For residential.
So if they're
Commissioner Robinson?
Well, I just question if they decide to go off the grid completely, can we charge them?
If they cut the cord, and they're no longer our customer, we'd have no basis under which to charge them.
Except for the lines connected to their house.
If they're no longer connected electrically, we would pull the meter and probably cut the service. We remove them from the system. They wouldn't pay us anything.
We don't, is there any possibility to affect the charge?
Not under our current system, and if you could do that in the future, but they would not be connected to us. So
No, but I mean, it's just a direct charge if they decide to go off the grid.
I guess
A one-time charge to disconnect.
Let me check with Joel. Do we?
The rate structure, it's weird. The way our rate structure. Yeah.
Not that anybody's going to go off the grid. Not that anybody's going to go off the grid.
No, I know. You would have to you'd only be able to go off the grid, obviously, if you had battery backups that you would charge your batteries all day and then at night. Because at night, the moon's just not bright enough for these things to work. So basically, because of our rate structure, it's weird. We don't charge you to disconnect things. We charge you to reconnect things. Okay. So let's say someone said, you know what, I got batteries. I got enough solar to power my house. I don't need Lake Worth Utilities anymore. Can you do me a favor, please? Close my account and disconnect me from your grid. We would go pull a meter, like Ed said. We would disconnect the line. If they wanted to reconnect, then they would be charged the initial application and fee and $140 to reconnect to the pole and things like that.
Okay.
But
And
we
the
don't
correct
have,
deposit.
Yeah, and the correct deposit. We don't have any rates for disconnection. It's all for reconnection.
And if they wanted to, like you said, that's the point I was going to make before you said it was they'd have to have a battery backup.
Yeah, they would, unless they don't want, I mean, everyone's
are
different.
people-
Some people
there
just
are
don't
people
want
off the
power
grid
at
right
night.
now.
But yeah, otherwise they would have to have some sort of battery backups that
They
charge
can
all
do
day
that.
long.
Okay, so the next item, suggestion that we retain the 10 kilowatt cap on system sizes. This will allow for more customers to participate in net metering until such time that we have a second tie line and we can revisit the need for a cap on the total amount of net metered installations. So we currently have a cap of 1.5% of our system peak. Our system peak is 97 megawatts. 1.5 would be about 1,400 kW, 1.4 megawatts. We currently have about 0.8 megawatts of connected solar, customer-owned solar on the system. We could basically almost double that, or go up by another 600 to 700 kW before we hit that cap. By keeping a 10 kW tier, more customers could participate under that cap. So, for example, if we didn't have that cap and a very large customer came in with a 200, 300, 400 kW system, it would basically close out all of the available load that could be picked up there. So the chart that Joel provided you is an example of a 10 kW system and what that 10 kW system would produce in a calendar year. And this is data that comes from a program called PV Watts, which is one of the industry standards for calculating how much a system will produce for a given geographic location and a rooftop installation. Roughly 15,000 kilowatt hours per year would be produced by a 10 kW system. We looked at the total number of customers that we have that could be served by a 10 kW system. So the most obvious answer is, well, every customer we have could install something of 10 kW or less. However, 19,000 customers would have their needs fully met by a 10 kW system. So if you were in the first tier, 19, which is 10 kW, 19,300 of our customers would be fine. All of their energy
Total number
needs.
of customers?
27,000.
So 19,000 of our 27,000 customers would have their needs 100% met by 10. What about people with larger square foot houses that want to
they could still install a 10, but it would not meet 100% of their needs. So the larger the system, if you go above 10, for every 10 you go above, you decrease the possibility for somebody who doesn't need to go above. You basically, you reduce the space available for them in the system under our 1.5% cap.
Okay.
And we broke that out by residential and commercial and on the data sheet, so you have that.
Commissioner Hardy?
Okay, so of those 27,000 customers, about how many of them are residential?
24,000.
Okay. And of those 19,000 customers who would be completely served by a 10 kW system, about how many of them are residential?
17,421. I think it's on the bottom of that new one that I just gave you guys.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right, you're talking about a small difference. You're talking about 7,000 or so.
Correct.
Person difference. Okay. And we've had these discussions in private. So there was discussion in the EUAB about tiering, right? Like if you have a larger structure with greater energy needs, we could have potentially allowed you to have a slightly larger system. It doesn't mean that we would tier up to, for example, the Palm Beach State level, which is like a huge sprawling campus, where if they were to, go solar, they would soak up pretty much the rest of the capacity that's left. But we could tier up to a reasonable level to accommodate people with large homes to have 100% of their needs met. And I'm wondering, while it might be unreasonable, given that we have a 1.5 megawatt cap, to allow tiering up to the Palm Beach State level, could we not allow tiering up to the house at the end of Duke Drive level, Castle property house level? Those are large houses that would probably not be served, some of them, by this 10 kW cap completely. And I'm wondering what was the discussion around that, because there was certainly, I think, a healthy discussion about that in the EUAB meetings.
Yes, and that's good entree because it helps to give some more background on this. The thought was that everybody should be able to net meter, and the law says that they can. We need to have a program where we need to have interconnection agreements. The cap that we have on the total amount of installed solar is driven by a technical concern, an operational concern, due to the nature of the design of our system, really as an island with a single tie line. So we have situations today, and have had for a number of years, when we're in an island operation, or when we've lost all power through the tie line and we're bringing back the city from zero power, what we refer to as a black start, bringing up the city from zero. Our own solar project causes our frequency, and we have alternating current, AC current, 60 cycles per second. It causes our frequency to swing to such an extent that we take our own 1.7 megawatt system offline.
Our solar farm.
Our own solar farm. We turn it off. It's counterintuitive that on a bright summer day when we might be in an island operation, we take it offline. We shut it off. Why? Because it swings production as clouds pass over, and certainly during the course of the day, but absolutely as cloud cover comes and goes, thunderstorms come and go, the production will swing significantly. It will swing the frequency on that circuit and on the system. When we are in an island operation, we are really hanging the system on the spinning mass, if you will, of the generators at our own power plant. And those frequency fluctuations are such that our power plant cannot respond to them fast enough. So it either affects the power plant negatively, or it affects the circuits that the solar is attached to negatively and drags down the frequency and will cause power quality concerns. So much so that before we even had this net metering discussion, our system operations team was taking the solar farm offline during those types of events. When we started looking at solar more closely and recognized that solar was doubling every year, as is provided in your backup, we said, this is going to become a big problem. We don't have control over those individual solar systems, nor are we seeking that level of control. So it's going to manifest, or could manifest itself as, frequency problems on the circuits where solar is during these periods of island operations, or what we refer to as a black start operation, where we've coming up for a complete loss of tie line on the power plant. When we're connected to the FPL network transmission system, this is not a concern. because we have the adequate spinning mass, if you will, of all the generators on that system to support our frequency. But with a single tie line, we're at risk. Anytime we lose that tie line, we have to knock the system offline. So what we propose is that we have a cap on the total installed capacity, if you will, of solar installations behind the meter until such time that we resolve this tie line issue, so we can then revisit it, because the number of outages we have will be far less likely to occur.
Mr. Hardy?
Sure. So the cap, the overall cap, dictates the individual net meters capacity cap, because it is the idea that everyone has a right to net meter, but not that everyone has a right to net meter for 100% of their needs. So I guess my question is, you said that we revisit it when we get a second tie line. Is there something in the resolution that says, when a second tie line gets built, we shall, for example, eliminate the cap or increase it automatically to a level that, we can determine is safe, that would kind of, make sure that there are no technical issues? Because we don't have the best history of revisiting things that get buried in resolutions years later. And so I just want to make sure that once the technical issue with the cap is solved, that the cap is more or less abolished or amended to be more generous.
I don't.
That was a question to end.
That's a very good point. We did not want to bake anything into this process that would require us to do something that would obviously require further technical study at that time. I don't think this is something that's going to be forgotten in a couple of years. I think that the interest in solar is significant in the marketplace, in the nation, and certainly locally, that there'll be customers, should we have reached the cap, would be knocking on the door saying, we need to move this cap. And I think that this body would obviously consider, certainly staff would consider it and bring it forward and say, we need to look at this. But staff, and namely me and the rest of the team, didn't agree that it was prudent to actually bake something in and said, once we have the second tie line, then boom, the cap has to come off. I think that that's a policy matter that you could certainly, as a body, suggest.
That's a policy matter we could decide right now.
It would put, there has to be some technical review at that time. It's certainly our belief that a second tie line will help solve this problem, but we didn't bake that in right now. My suggestion, it's purely suggestion, would be that you wait until such time that we have that second tie line and then revisit this if it's an issue. If in fact there are customers that are trying to get in and we don't have enough room for them, then that's something that this group could revisit.
Okay. And I guess finally, it's your position everyone has a right to net meter, but not that everyone has a right to net meter for 100% of their needs. I did not feel that was the position, and I obviously can't speak for that board, but I attended the net metering meeting with the EUAB. Based on what I saw, it appeared that a few members of the EUAB, the few that participated in the meeting, seemed to be for some sort of tiering, perhaps not tiering to the level that would allow Palm Beach State to take care of 100% of its needs, or a very large business, extremely large business, to take care of 100% of its needs. But I don't think it's unreasonable to say that someone who lives in a very large house should be able to take care of 100% of their needs with solar panels. And if the idea is that, well, other people won't be able to serve by that, one way that we ration things are by lines. If you come first, you get the good. If you come after the good is sold out, you don't get the good. While I would empathize with someone who came after everyone else, I do think every residential customer should have the ability to have panels that meet 100% of their needs. While it's a minority of the customers on our system, it's still 7,000 customers who are residential. And I would hope that we would consider tiering them to allow them. And if people later are not able to participate, they just happen to come after.
I have my issue with that is, and I appreciate Commissioner Hardy. Ed, you and I have had discussion since we started talking about this whole thing, and you know pretty much where I stand on it, but maybe the rest of you don't. I'm confident in a tiering system in the future, Commissioner Hardy, and to everyone else at home. The concerns I had were, we're still an electric company. We sell our electric, and we have to run things like a business. I was concerned about the safety issues that we had, and in reference to these systems coming on and us not knowing where it's coming from, when it's coming from. And I appreciate the fact and the work that you guys have done to figure out how many homes and how many people. I don't think it's fair. I don't think, first come, first serve is good on one hand, but we're a government, so we try to keep consistent and keep the same rule that applies for everybody. I don't think someone should be penalized that wants to build a larger system or someone who wants to build a smaller system. And if you want to go off the grid, please go off the grid. Do it, and you can also, have your own backup generator. A lot of people don't want to buy the battery backup generators that will allow them to suck energy into their homes at nighttime and other places that would be much more cost efficient for them, and probably the reasons they got solar panels and systems to begin with. But again, we're a city and this is our business, so we have to at least cover our costs. So I appreciate the first part of this conversation. I do, however, think, because we're a company, we have to stay in business and have revenue. I think a second tier should be examined when we have the second tie line completely. I think that not an extensive tier, it could be a smaller tier that exists, but there are some people that are going over this. Yeah, I see. You just wanted to talk to. That are going, want to go over their system because they might have, a 3,000 square foot, 4,000 square foot and plus houses. New residents are coming in wanting to build larger systems. I get it, but I also know that we have to protect the entire company and the taxpayers in the city and all the members of this utility. That's the thing people need to realize. They're all owners of this utility too. And their contributions are they're working partners with us on this. So we have to take public safety into fact, but I do think that we need to re-examine a second tier of the solar, because it's the wave of the future and where people are going and what more people are interested in it. But again, for people who say, I want to be 100% compliant or whatever, they can be in their own backup battery system and do that. But they can also, we still have to supply and distribute and repair the lines and maintain the lines and increase those things. If you're going to come through our system, we still have to repair it, and we're still working on those lines, and we still have to maintain them. We're improving our T&D and everything else that we're doing throughout the city. It comes through those lines. So we have to take that into account. Commissioner Robinson?
I just had a question. You're talking about from a black start or whatever, not using our solar field, but the people that have solar panels are going to be able to have electricity whether we have coming through the tie line or not?
Correct. As long as there is an AC signal, meaning that there is power on the grid at their home, their panels, their inverter will synchronize and begin to produce power for them. If we're not able to impress current or voltage on that transformer feeding their home, the system won't work.
It won't work.
Their solar system won't work.
It's like our power went off.
Well,
The inverters require the inverters on a solar system are converting the DC power that the panels produce into alternating current. That inverter, I refer to it as a handshake. It needs to be able to look over to the AC power on the other side and say, okay, that's what I'm going to latch up to and synchronize to. If it doesn't see power, it will not provide that conversion.
and there's no technology that would allow them just to.
There may be. I'm just not familiar enough at a deep level to get to that. Customers can certainly store it as DC power in batteries. And then convert it, and use it as DC power. Maybe have some other specialized, inverters in their home which would produce AC. But that's a relatively expensive option. I don't know if there's a lot of customers who are certainly not the mainstream isn't going to do that, but there may be some customers out there that can afford to do that.
The systems alone are like, what, $30,000 average?
The prevailing number appears to be around $3 per watt installed to install a solar system. It could vary by the type of roof that you have and other bells and whistles. So let's say a 10 kW system, nominally, $30,000 to $35,000, depending on the nuances of that installation and whatever program that vendor is providing. And then the battery systems are nominally, I've seen numbers between 8 to 12,000. So I just say generically $10,000 for a system, for a battery storage system. Not a lot of people have gone for the battery storage systems. I do think that you're going to see more in the future. So if we're having this conversation 5 and 10 years from now, I think batteries will be much cheaper than they are today and much more prevalent.
They can use them anytime. Any other power that they overproduce, they use it within their systems. Yeah, they store.
Correct. I also I don't see a day when many people actually disconnect from the grid, because the grid brings far too many benefits, and customers like having the security of the grid there. So certainly solar is a good option, but the most likely thing to happen is that solar will continue to grow, and that customers will retain their connection to the utility and enjoy the benefits of having a solar system on their home as they perceive the benefits, as well as the power that we produce. But we also have solar offerings, so and we'll be bringing more solar offerings in the future. So customers will have the option to buy solar power from us at some point in the future. So right now it's bundled for all customers, and we're looking at other alternatives as well.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to weigh in just a little bit on the discussion regarding the tiering system. I too felt that initially that maybe, we should have a more generous system. But then after I learned that, there's just so much that we can do without you getting into interruption and service reliability issues. The other thing I learned was that, and I hope I'm not misstating this, but, if we all close our eyes for a moment and think about where we are in time and where we are with this system in terms of its age and its initial design and construction, it's my understanding that the idea, the concept of solar panels and, having net metering was certainly not on anybody's mind when this system was designed. And therefore, the system is not necessarily designed to intake, easily solar generation. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct. The system has evolved over 100 years.
Right. So
it's not
dinosaurs roam.
Exactly.
It's not a modern day system, and solar, interconnections like this just came onto the landscape circa 2009 when the state got behind it.
Right. So that's why the word you used earlier was baked. That's why it's not baked into this resolution. I think that, as we reinvest into the system and harden the system and upgrade the system, we need to take those steps one step at a time, so we don't overcommit ourselves today in 2019 for something we're not going to be able to maybe produce in the future, given my elementary understanding of, again, the way the system was designed and the fact that it's not really designed to receive, on an individual basis, electricity back into the system. So I'm perfectly comfortable with the way you're proposing the tier system. Thank you. Or no tier system, but the 10 kilowatt cap.
So I can continue with some of the other.
Yes.
Hardy?
Yeah, just two things. As far as the fact that we're a business, and obviously every person who buys solar panels is a person who becomes less of a customer to us, and that harms the utility in a way, because we still have to take care of the lines and do all this capital improvement stuff, which is fine. But potentially one way to make sure that everyone pays their fair share is to have a kind of minimum bill. And I'm wondering to what extent that was explored here, tying the idea of a minimum bill to this net metering conversation. And then the other thing is, my understanding is that the tie line, or rather the lack of a second tie line and the technical issues having to do with, the fact that you have to take down our solar and bring it back on in these island operations, which take place a few times a year.
Yes.
Okay. Kind of drove the need for the cap, for the overall cap, which kind of drove the need for the individual caps, right? And so, to the extent that our system is a radial system and it's not sectionalized, does that have something to do with the 10 kW cap on capacity that a homeowner can buy? So two questions: the minimum bill,
Yeah.
And is there a way that we can make a minimum bill work so that everybody pays into the, transmission, distribution, infrastructure, capital improvement needs? Whether the fact that we have a radial system is related to the 10 kW cap and the overall cap. Just in the explanation that you gave, that wasn't there, so I'm wondering, are they related?
Well, the minimum bill was addressed already. Mr. Gretzky talked
Right.
about the $31.
Right. I'm talking about something that would address specifically the desire to have people net meter. Obviously, that $31 is not sufficient to compensate for all of that.
The minimum bill is one that was created during our last rate case, if you will, and it's been there for some period of time. We have no intention really haven't considered having two different minimum bills, one for a customer who net meters and one for a customer who does not, just happens to use a minimum amount of power.
So we're just asking.
We're saying that they all pay the same minimum bill. We're not looking
They're not paying it at all.
that's something we hadn't considered. But are you suggesting that we should have two different tiers of minimum bills?
Well,
That's
you could
not something
potentially have two different tiers, or you could adjust the one minimum bill to make sure that everyone pays into, you don't have to have two tiers. You could just have a higher minimum bill. And how many people have a minimum bill that's lower than, how do you have a bill that's lower than $31?
The net metering people are not paying $31.
I think we just all have to.
They're just trying to get them to pay
I
the
think
same.
the first thing is, I think we have to understand exactly how the minimum bill works. The minimum bill doesn't mean that there's another line item on your bill. Right? Doesn't mean that. All right. So the minimum bill of 31. So here's the two different bills that you get from us, one or the other. If you use over the minimum charge, which the $31.40, which includes your
Customer service.
electric consumption charge, combined with your customer service charge of $10.53 for a residential customer, then you just get the customer service charge plus the kilowatt hour charge. That's it. That's a normal bill. For customers, and trust me, you'd be surprised how many people have a bill lower than $31.50. You'd be surprised that if you use less than, so what you do is if you take $31.40 and you subtract the $10.53, leaves you about $20, and then you divide that by our first tier rate, it comes out to about 211 kilowatt hours. So basically, any residential customer that does not get billed from us for 211 kilowatts or so, instead of getting a customer service charge and a kilowatt hour charge and a fuel charge and all that stuff, they will just get one line, electric, $31.40. Across the board, no matter what type of system you have, whether it's net metered or not.
These would be snowbirds. These would be all sorts of
Absolutely.
people.
And a lot of snowbirds, when they're away, not for nothing, but most of the snowbirds don't get a minimum bill because most of the snowbirds have larger homes and they're using $31 worth of electric anyway. We get a lot of minimum bills for, I'll give you an example. Customer that owns a multifamily property, right? They have one electric house meter, and they have, if it's a 6-family property, they have, each tenant puts the electric in their own name. The house meter is strictly for a parking lot light or something like that. There's no way they're going to use 200 kilowatt hours, so they automatically get their minimum bill. The majority of, I'd say the largest customer we have that gets minimum bills is Comcast. Each one of their boxes that use our electric has a meter on it, and pretty much almost all of them use less than the 200 kilowatt hours, so they get actually, I think the minimum bill for a commercial is $50. They get a commercial minimum bill.
I guess my point is, obviously the minimum bill isn't enough to address the concerns we have about people who net meter not paying to their fair share. First of all, they don't pay the minimum bill. Secondly, if they paid it, we're not sure they'd be paying their fair share of the cost to maintain the transmission and distribution system. And so I'm wondering if it would be more equitable simply to charge them for the transmission and distribution system that they use, like an actual true rate, or to adjust upward the minimum, which I'm not sure if that would be equitable.
I don't even think we're allowed.
Okay.
Because I know over the years.
I mean, did we investigate the legality of that?
I can tell you over the years that all the investor-owned utilities in the state have constantly tried to get on the ballot a standby charge, so to speak, for net metered customers. And I think they got it on the ballot, I think a couple of years back, and it got voted down unanimously.
Okay. But I mean, do we know from a legal standpoint that it's illegal? I don't want to get into a philosophical question about the meaning of knowledge, but do we know that a minimum bill, a standby charge, so to speak, for people who net meter, which would probably be equitable for them and for the city, do we know that that's not legal?
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Hardy, what we're guided by is it has to be fair and equitable, all of our rates. if they could make a case for charging net metering a higher minimum bill than everybody else, it's possible you could do that. But that may be a hard case to make.
I mean, apparently
I'm more concerned about just having everyone pay the same minimum bill right now and make it fair and
Yeah,
equitable.
it's-
to the system. I think
it's-
that's probably the best.
okay. I mean,
scenario. I wouldn't want to make anyone pay more.
there's a difference between treating someone equally and treating someone equitably. If someone uses more of a, uses a system but doesn't pay into it, perhaps they need to pay more than everybody. It's kind of like that old, I don't know if you've been to those equity workshops. It's like you have a short person, a medium person, and a tall person. They're all trying to look at a baseball game over the same fence. You don't necessarily give them all the same size stool. You give the short person a taller stool, the medium person a medium stool, and the tall person I don't necessarily think you have to treat everyone equally to treat them equitably, but I understand it's not something that we're into exploring at this time. And then the last thing, did we look into paying a more generous rate to homesteaded property owners, people who live in their homes, and are our customers as well? And that'll be my last question.
We did not look at differentiating by the nature of ownership of the home, whether it's a tenant, a homesteaded, or a non-homesteaded property.
Okay.
We did not get into that differentiation. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be looked at in the future, but we didn't look at it at this time for this purpose.
And I just to respond to what Commissioner said, the reason I was suggesting that is there are 3 cases that I know firsthand of that relate to legal challenges on that matter, and it's been ruled every time illegal to make those kind of changes to rates other than the same rate for each customer, based on the 3 court challenges that they had. Right,
Okay. Thank you. Years ago, Madam Mayor, I think you and Commissioner and Vice Mayor Amoroso were here. We had one of those electric utility aha moments when we realized that the base monthly charge that we were charging our customers did not cover our fixed cost of running the utility. In other words, the example I used is it costs $1 million to have trucks and linemen and everybody here to, on standby to do the work. We were only charging, $800,000 in base fees, which is one of the reasons why our rates and everything were so out of whack over the years. So once we had that aha moment, we went back and realized that, and there was a little bit of pushback because some of the snowbirds, I hate that term, by the way, some of the snowbirds were pushing back, saying, well, wait a minute, I'm not here so many months out of the year. And we said, well, wait a minute, the argument we have for you is that, you may not be here, but somebody has to be available to service that pole, that connection to your house if something happens 24/7, 365 days a year. So, I think that what's being proposed here is perfectly fine, that a net metering customer just simply pay the same base charge that everybody else. And, I know there's some folks out there that think that there's a fear amongst the electeds or maybe the utility itself that maybe one day the concept of folks having so many solar panels out there that somehow that's going to hurt us, our electric utility. And my understanding is this: at the end of the day, we still have all those poles, we have all those lines and those connections to those homes. So unless everybody literally goes off the grid, which is I think we've established it's not going to happen, there's always going to be a base charge, and we're always going to be in a position as a municipality to ask the utility to charge a base charge that will, in fact, make sure that the electric utility remains profitable and in a manner that, continue to serve the city in the way it has in the past. So I don't see, mathematically speaking, that there'll ever be a time where everybody in the system goes on solar, unless they go off the grid, that somehow that's going to have a negative impact on the utility.
Ed?
If I could address that question. The underlying tenet in the utility industry is the obligation to serve. We have the obligation to serve all customers in our territory. That's inherent in the investor-owned utility. It's inherent in our business, in the municipals. I haven't worked in the municipals for much of my career, but I can't imagine that it wouldn't be an obligation to serve as well. Obligation to serve is much more than just having the wire connected to the home. It's the obligation to have the energy and the capacity available to serve that customer, whether they asked for it in advance or not. So we don't have the luxury or the right to say to a customer, hey, I'm sorry it's cloudy today. We didn't buy any energy for you. I know we have a wire connected to your home, but we're not going to send you any today because we didn't plan on it. Yeah. We're obviously not going to do that. We have the obligation to serve. So we're maintaining adequate capacity energy contracts, transmission rights, transmission capacity, distribution capacity, to in fact deliver energy to that customer, because we know that invariably they're going to need it, even though they have a project to produce some of the solar on their home, even though they may have installed a battery, even though they decided today to disconnect because they're going back north for the summer, but they're going to come back and reconnect in 4 or 5 months. We have to be ready for them. We don't have the option to say, sorry, we can't handle you. Call us next year. We'll see if we got some extra. No, we serve it on the spot. And that costs us money, and that cost has to be borne by all of the customers who are connected to the system and that are in the territory. Those are things we're obligated to have.
I think what's really interesting too, I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I'm sorry.
No, I'm done.
At the U.S. Conference of Mayors, a lot of cities, we got into pretty deep discussions. And I was asking them, I said, how are you handling, as the push for our cities to be 100% renewable and our commitment to it? And we have done that here as a commission. How do you do this when you're in the business of producing energy? How do you offer? And there are a number of programs that are coming through the USCM and that are grant opportunities for electric utilities to offer bigger incentives to help subsidize municipally owned electric to offer. They're not many and they're not that big as of yet, but they're starting to see that this is where we're moving. And unfortunately, when states like Texas are bigger solar users than the Sunshine State, I still don't understand that in any way, shape, or form. But, it's so crazy that we haven't utilized that. But I know that some of those opportunities are coming to help us create new types of programs that give benefits to people who use solar.
And to that point, I know, I can imagine who's listening and who's sitting behind and thinking things and maybe not saying, maybe whispering them to each other. But we are doing things at a very aggressive level to bring solar energy into this community.
Right.
If you look at the list of FMPA member utilities, municipal utilities, and look at the amount of megawatts as a percentage of their load, or even outright number of megawatts have been committed to, we're way up there in terms of our commitment. We've committed to 10 megawatts already under contract. We have an indication, expression of interest, which we intend to take the contract for an additional 30. So we'll be 40 megawatts of solar. So it's not like we're trying to stop people from getting off of the fossil fuel or the fuel mix that we have.
Plus our own solar farm.
And our own solar farm, our own investment, 1.7 megawatts of steel on the ground and panels pointing up in the sky that we've made. So it shouldn't be lost in this or anybody walk away from this dialogue thinking that we're somehow not a green, progressive, forward-thinking utility. We are driving this utility to a fuel mix that, according to our projections, would have us, 55% plus, close to 58% plus of our power coming from non-carbon sources by 2024. That's the marching orders. That's where we are going. So it's not like we're trying to stop the green movement or stop going solar. What we're trying to do is make sure that we can effectively operate, maintain our system, and bring the benefits of solar renewable and a lower carbon footprint to all of our customers, not just the few that can happen to afford to install these systems, but what about the other 26,900 who can't afford it or who choose not to? They should enjoy the benefits of solar, and we want to import that solar for their benefit as well.
Commissioner Robinson?
I'm good with everybody pays service rate. But the 10 cap is based on about a 2,000 square foot house.
It's not necessarily tied to a 2,000 square foot house.
Well, all right.
It's approximately, I think if you looked at the energy consumption of a 2,000 square foot house, it'd probably come pretty close.
Okay. So if somebody builds a 5,000 square foot house, can they appeal to get a different rate? I mean,
I'm sure.
I want to be flexible and encourage mega homes as well.
I can't think of anything.
And we only have 5 lots probably that can take those, but anyhow.
I can't think of anything in the city that a resident might not want to ultimately appeal to this body to achieve. So sure, if somebody felt the need to go higher to get an approval, I think they would bring that forward as a request all the way to the commission.
And you don't need any. That's an automatic. I mean,
I can't imagine I'd have the ability to stop anybody from bringing something to the commission.
Well, does it have to be in writing or? can we just assume that
I'd
you
have
have
to
the
defer
right
to
to
council
appeal?
on the process that they would follow.
Council?
Madam Mayor, we have a resolution currently that has the 10 kW cap in place along with the 1.5% cap in place. So if someone wanted a variance from that, this body would have to pass a resolution expanding those caps and that kilowatt limitation for that property owner. So you just have to do another resolution.
Well,
After they appeal?
Right, if they wanted to build something bigger than what we currently allow by resolution, then you would have to do a new
And
resolution.
they would have the right to appeal?
There's nothing that would prevent anyone from coming up at public comment to say, I want to build a 20
Yeah.
kilowatt system. I'm asking you, would you consider my system? And like anything, we would then take direction from the commission as to what you wanted to do.
But a
I just want to be a little flexible.
second resolution would have to be passed.
That's correct.
Commissioner Hardy?
So, in other words, people still have their First Amendment rights to come up here and petition us, but we'd have to go through a process similar to this one, probably a lot less brain damage. We'd have to ask you to draft a resolution from scratch to affect this person. There's no built-in appellate process, or like someone, like in our, chapter 23, there's a bunch of built-in processes for people to, come to planning and zoning and seek a variance. And in chapter 23, there's something in there that says, okay, planning and zoning, they can appeal. There's nothing in this resolution like that.
Madam Mayor, Commissioner Hardy, there's nothing like that. But what I would caution you is that, and I would say this if that came before you, is that for each one who makes that petition, if you allow it, it makes it a harder and harder thing to deny others in the same position. So in the variance you're talking about,
Unless you had a
usually there's
variance
some type of
criteria.
criteria and standard.
Right.
So that would be the hard thing in this situation of if someone came in, having to listen to that situation and determine if there's some specific need or if it's just the pleasure of the commission that you want to increase your caps.
Mr. Robinson?
Because we don't have a tiered system.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. You have a
So-
10 kW cap
And that's
on
a cap.
all,
And
but there's also, there's, keep in mind, there's two caps here. So the two caps, which were originally created in 2012, is a 10K cap on all systems. But it's also limited by your annual energy needs.
Right.
So if your annual energy needs don't get to 10 kW, your system actually has to be smaller than 10 kW. Then you have the 1.5% cap, which is the total cap on the system. So anytime someone would come in and exercise their First Amendment rights to say, hey, I want to be able to build a system, that's what we'd have to look at, and then whatever the pleasure of the commission is.
Okay. Okay. And then, on the last bit, you're very correct. It's like the lesser of the caps, right? Okay. So just, let's say someone has a home smaller than, let's say they have a home and they only really need 5 kW, right, of capacity, right, at their house. And so we limit them to that, right? But what if they are willing to go into the market and buy some batteries, right, from Tesla or whoever, right, to store energy in excess of what they need for their home for that month or whatever, right? Let's say they want to save it up for a rainy day, for a hurricane, whatever, for any purpose whatsoever. Would that 5 kW cap that matches their needs still apply?
Madam Mayor, I think that's a technical question you need to refer to your experts on.
Yes, it would still apply because it's a cap on the connected system. You're connected to our system, the cap would still be your annual use, regardless of whether you put a battery in or not.
Okay. All right.
We've got a public comment card. Justin Hoisrath?
Needs a microphone.
Needs a microphone.
Is it on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sitting on it, so. Good evening, Commission, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. I'm going to try to temper myself as, again, I am Justin Hoisrad. I live in the city of West Palm Beach. I'm a solar energy contractor, but tonight, again, I am representing the solar industry in Florida as a whole, so I will attempt to temper my comments as best as possible because I'm not just representing myself and my customers. Yeah, so tonight I have heard a lot of what I would typically call malarkey. This is challenging conversation and it's difficult. A couple of weeks ago, the commission brought together a conversation about we need to be as good as, if not better than FPL, and what we're hearing tonight is nowhere near that equivalent. We as an industry submitted a letter representing some of the comments that were brought up in the 6 items that were brought to the commission. One of them was the support of leveling out the minimum bill and that all people are charged the same rate and keep it fair. But in addition, the commission, many members who are sitting here tonight, except for you, Madam Mayor, expounded to the public that they wanted something that was equal to the retail rate, maybe even better. And we're now being told that the retail rate will not even be considered and wholesale will be provided to customers at a monthly tiered up basis. This is such a challenging thing that we've listened to throughout the last number of weeks, only to be pushed back on to be told customers are going to get less than what we've talked about through public process. The 1.5% cap that we're talking about was brought on during the conversation about the interconnection agreement. Nobody asked for that. That was brought to you by the utility director. And just to put it into perspective, 600 to 700 kW in additional solar at 10 kW is only 60 to 70 new customers. Ed has already told us that this is doubling every year. That's 1 year where you have to bring this back to the dais. It is not appropriate. This is not as good as FPL.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor state so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to, adjournment.
Commissioner Hardy, did you vote against that one?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
So moved.
Move second for adjournment.
We're leaving?
I need a second.
It's early.
I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Good night, everyone.